this past Sunday night at our church, PHC, we had a worship night. And it was something that we just wanted to provide people of the body an opportunity to gather together and express their worship to God through song, express their worship through prayer. We even made the communion table available to them, and so they expressed worship through the partaking of the communion. It was an awesome night, seeing both young and old gather together and those in between, and just really joining together for a night of worship. But as I brought a few thoughts that night, I did some extra reading and studying, and I've been doing some thinking about worship itself. And I think perhaps even inadvertently, we have taken what is a very big, broad idea, and we have narrowed it and made it very small to fit sort of our ideas of what we think worship is. And so I just want to take a few moments and just really share with you a couple of thoughts, and perhaps to bring a broader perspective of worship and what it is. But in order to do that, I think it's good to sort of lay out a few thoughts of what worship is not. And these thoughts are really generated, I think, in Mark Driscoll's book, Vintage Jesus. He really spells these out, maybe not word for word, but these general ideas. And I think it's worth thinking about that worship is not something that's done solely by Christians. Sometimes we think only Christians worship, but by and large, every single person worships because that's how we were created. We were created to worship. And unfortunately, most people choose to worship something or someone other than the only one who's worthy of the worship. But worship is not solely for Christians alone. Worship also is not relegated to a particular time and place. In other words, we don't worship only when we step through the doors of a church. We don't worship only when we're in a church event or on a missions trip. Worship can't be contained to that. In fact, in John chapter 4, Jesus had a revolutionary discussion with a woman who tried to really bring worship down to a particular time and a particular place, and Jesus sort of blew her out of the water with that. So worship is not that. Worship also is not something that we start and stop. It's not a faucet. We don't turn the worship faucet on and then we turn it off whenever we leave church or we leave a concert or we leave a worship event. Worship is not all of those things. See, worship is literally, according to the creator of worship, God, worship is a 24/7 endeavor. It's something that we do, or at least have the opportunity to do, every second of our lives. In fact, here's how Paul describes worship in the book of Romans. In Romans chapter 11, verse 36, he says, "For from him," speaking of Christ, "and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen." And then chapter 12, verse 1 says this, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual or reasonable act of worship." Literally, every day that I live is an opportunity for me to worship. I worship in how I talk. I worship in how I dress. I worship in how I act. I worship in what I think. All of these things. It is literally a 24/7 endeavor for me, and I have the opportunity as a Christ follower to worship God with every single breath that I take. You know, if you think about it, the opposite of worship is idolatry, because worship really belongs only to one, and that's to God, the creator of life. That's why we worship him. The sustainer of life. That's why we worship him. The giver of salvation, because of what God the Son, Jesus Christ, did for us. All of these reasons, he and he alone is the only one worthy of our worship. So in order for us to provide our worship to someone or something else, it's nothing short of idolatry. And yet my flesh is prone to worship myself. My flesh is prone to worship my money, my stuff, the things that bring me pleasure. And so I just really want us to think about worship. And I ask you this question, like I'm asking myself right now: am I truly worshiping God? Not just when I walk into a service, not just when I walk into a building, but every day of my life, in the way that I live my life, am I truly worshiping? Are you truly worshiping God? We're all worshiping something or someone, but are you truly, truly worshiping God? I think A.W. Tozer summed it up best in this quote when he says, if you don't worship God 7 days a week, you don't worship God 1 day a week. So how's your worship going? Have a great day, and just think about that.